The rain poured relentlessly, painting the empty streets in silver streaks. It was close to 2 a.m. when Jack noticed a lone figure standing beneath a flickering streetlight. The city was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the pavement and the distant hum of passing cars. Jack slowed his steps. He had just finished his night shift with the sanitation crew, his reflective vest glowing faintly under the dim lights. Something about that girl standing there, drenched, trembling, and lost, made him stop. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said gently, his tone calm but firm. "It's not safe, especially at this hour." Startled, the girl turned sharply. Her soaked hair clung to her cheeks, and her wide eyes flashed with fear. "I don't need your pity," she said, hugging herself tighter against the cold wind. Jack stayed where he was, keeping his distance. "I'm not offering pity," he replied softly. "Just a warm place for the night. 4 walls, running water, and no strangers with bad intentions." The girl's shoulders shook. She tried to look strong, but her voice betrayed her. "I got robbed," she admitted finally, her gaze falling to the wet ground. "My phone's dead. My bag's gone. I have nowhere to go." Jack hesitated. His instincts told him to walk away. He had a daughter at home, Lily, just 6 years old. Taking in a stranger at 2 a.m. wasn't something a cautious man did. But when he looked at the girl again, so young, so frightened, and yet holding herself with quiet pride, his heart decided before his head could stop him. "Come on," he said, adjusting his work bag. "I live 2 blocks from here. It's small, but it's warm. You can crash on the couch for the night." The girl hesitated, her lips trembling. "You don't even know my name," she murmured. Jack gave a faint smile. "You don't need a name to need help." They walked in silence through the dimly lit streets. Jack kept a few steps behind her, respectful but alert. When they reached his small duplex, he unlocked the door and motioned her inside. The house was modest, clean but worn, with a few children's drawings taped to the fridge and a tiny pink backpack near the shoe rack. The air smelled faintly of coffee and detergent. "Leave your shoes by the mat," Jack said quietly. "You can use the couch. There's a blanket in the closet." She nodded wordlessly, wiping rain from her face. Jack disappeared for a moment and returned with a towel, a soft blanket, and one of his old sweatshirts. "The bathroom's on the right," he said. "The hot water takes a minute to start. You can shower if you like." The girl accepted the bundle hesitantly, glancing up at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Jack rubbed the back of his neck, unsure how to answer. "Because you looked like you needed help," he said. "And I'd hope someone would do the same for my daughter if she ever found herself in trouble." At the word daughter, something flickered in her eyes, something fragile, like longing. She disappeared into the bathroom without another word. While she showered, Jack scribbled a quick note and placed it beside a steaming mug of water. Then he quietly retreated to his room, careful not to wake Lily, who was fast asleep in her little bed. When the girl, Emma, emerged 20 minutes later, she was wrapped in the oversized sweatshirt, her damp hair combed back. The living room was softly lit by a single lamp. On the coffee table sat the folded blanket, the warm mug, and the note. "If you need to call someone, the landline's on the wall. Don't hesitate to grab more blankets. Please keep the door closed. My daughter's a light sleeper." Emma stared at the note, her fingers brushing the edge of the cup. The warmth seeped into her hands, chasing away the chill of the night. For the first time in days, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: safe. She curled up on the couch, pulled the blanket around her shoulders, and listened to the rain quiet outside. The man who had helped her hadn't asked for her name, her story, or anything in return. He hadn't made her feel small or judged. She didn't know who he was beyond the name Jack, scribbled on the note. But for now, that was enough. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion win, and finally drifted to sleep. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. Inside, for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she had found a corner of the world that didn't hurt. A soft light crept through the window, brushing across Emma's face as she stirred. For a moment, She didn't remember where she was. The air was warm, the smell of something cooking lingered faintly, and somewhere close, she heard the quiet hum of a cartoon. Then it all came back. The rain, the stranger, the couch. Emma sat up slowly, the blanket falling around her shoulders. The house was quiet except for the sound of faint laughter. She looked around and spotted a little girl sitting cross-legged on the carpet, carefully stacking colorful plastic blocks into a tall, crooked tower. "Good morning," Emma said softly, her voice still raspy. The little girl turned, her curls bouncing as she looked up. Her eyes lit up with curiosity. "You're the princess who slept on our couch," she said proudly. Emma blinked, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Excuse me? My name's Lily," the girl said, puffing out her chest. "Daddy said a nice lady stayed here last night because she was cold and rained on. That's you, right?" Emma laughed quietly. "I suppose that's me. Nice to meet you, Lily." Before Lily could reply, a voice called from the kitchen. "Lily, breakfast duty. Come help me burn the toast." Lily giggled, jumping to her feet. "Coming, Daddy," she shouted, running off. Emma followed the sound, stretching as she moved toward the small kitchen. Jack stood by the stove, one hand flipping something in a pan, the other whisking eggs in a bowl. He looked different in daylight, less guarded, more human. "You cook?" Emma asked, leaning against the doorway, unsure if she was more surprised or impressed. Jack glanced over his shoulder. "Only if you can call it cooking. Most of it ends up burnt. You want to help?" Emma hesitated, eyeing the messy counter and the half-brown toast. "I can try," she said, "but full disclosure, I'm not exactly kitchen material." He smiled faintly and handed her a whisk. "Perfect. Neither am I. That's why the smoke alarm hates us." She laughed, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in days. Together, they moved around the tiny kitchen in awkward coordination. Jack scrambling eggs, Emma trying to butter the toast before it blackened, and Lily standing on a stool to hand them napkins like a little assistant chef. Of course, disaster struck. The spatula slipped from Emma's hand, the bowl tipped sideways, and half the eggs splattered across the counter. "Oh no!" she gasped, grabbing a towel. Before she could clean it, Lily rushed in with a paper towel, grinning. "It's okay. Daddy spills all the time too." Emma froze, then laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that filled the kitchen. Jack just smiled quietly and went back to cooking, pretending not to notice her blush. By the time breakfast was ready, the eggs were overdone, the toast was patchy, and the bacon looked more like jerky. But when Jack sat down and took a bite, he smiled. "This is great," he said, straight-faced. "You don't have to lie," Emma teased. "I'm not lying," Jack replied. "It's edible. That's already a win." Lily poked at hers suspiciously. "Daddy, the eggs taste funny." Jack coughed. "That's called flavor, kiddo." Emma nearly choked laughing. When breakfast ended, Jack started collecting dishes. "You two relax. I'll handle this." Emma offered to help, but he waved her off. As she moved back toward the living room with Lily, she noticed Jack quietly pulling another plate of freshly cooked eggs from the oven. For Lily, the plate he hadn't eaten from. She didn't say a word. Later that morning, Emma helped Lily build a Lego house on the floor. As they stacked the last few pieces, Lily leaned closer and whispered, "The eggs Daddy made after were better, but he said not to tell you." Emma raised an eyebrow, suppressing a smile. "Oh, he did he? Oops," Lily said, covering her mouth. Emma stood, walked to the kitchen, and leaned against the doorway again. Jack froze mid-bite at the table. "So," she said, crossing her arms playfully, "I burned breakfast, huh?" Jack looked up sheepishly. "You cooked breakfast. That's what matters." She smirked. "You could have just told me." He shrugged, eyes soft. "First times are always messy. Someone just needs to be there to eat it anyway." Emma stared at him for a long moment. There was something disarming about him. Quiet strength, simple honesty, the kind that made her chest tighten. "You said something last night," she said softly, "about helping your daughter if she ever needed it." "You're a good man, Jack." He didn't answer, just smiled faintly and went back to eating. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The days passed quietly after that morning. Emma decided to stay a little longer, at least until she figured out where to go next. Jack didn't ask questions, he just nodded when she offered to help around the house, fixing small things, folding laundry, keeping Lily company when he was at work. Life fell into a rhythm, not perfect, but peaceful. Every morning, Jack would head out early, still wearing that same worn-out denim jacket and those heavy work boots that always left faint dirt marks by the door. He'd leave before sunrise and return when the sky turned gold. Sometimes exhausted, sometimes smiling faintly, but always with the same simple line. "Long day, but we're making it." Emma didn't ask what he did for a living. She didn't need to. It was in his hands, rough, scarred, calloused, the kind of hands that built things not for glory but survival. One afternoon, she walked into the small town square nearby, the kind of place where the air smelled like bread and old wood. A handwritten sign hung outside a laundromat. "Help wanted. Immediate start." She stared at it for a long moment, then walked in. The job wasn't glamorous. She sorted clothes, folded towels, fed coins into humming machines. The floor smelled like detergent and heat, but every time she slipped a few dollars into her pocket at the end of the day, she felt something she hadn't in a long while: purpose. When she returned that evening, Lily ran to her at the door, waving a crayon drawing. "Look, Emma, it's us," she said, proudly holding up a page. The picture showed 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, and one with long hair holding a balloon. Emma smiled, her chest tightening just a bit. "That's beautiful, Lily. You're quite the artist." From the kitchen, Jack called out, "Dinner's almost ready." She walked in and saw him stirring a pot of something steaming. It smelled like stew. Rich, savory, homemade. "You didn't have to cook?" she said softly. Jack smirked. "You worked all day. My turn." Dinner that night was quiet but warm. The kind of quiet where you don't need words because everything feels understood. Later, when Lily was asleep, Emma found herself outside on the porch, the air cool and crisp. Jack joined her, sitting down beside her with 2 mugs of coffee. "So," he said, staring at the stars, "how's the laundromat treating you?" "Not bad," she said with a tired smile. "It's honest work. Pays enough for now." He nodded. "Sometimes that's all we need, enough for now." There was a pause, and then Emma spoke quietly. "You ever wonder if we're meant for more than enough for now?" Jack exhaled slowly. "All the time. But sometimes, surviving is more." They sat there in silence again, the crickets humming, the night stretching around them like a blanket. A few days later, Emma woke up to find a small brown box on the table. No note, just her name written across the top. She opened it slowly and froze. Inside was a brand new pair of shoes, clean, sturdy, simple. The kind you wear when you're standing all day at work. She blinked, her throat tightening. Her old shoes sat by the door, worn down to the threads, soles barely holding together. Jack stepped out from the hallway, rubbing the back of his neck. "They were on sale," he said quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Figured you could use 'em." "Jack, you didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently. "But I wanted to." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She just stood there, staring at the shoes, then back at him. "They're perfect," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Good. You'll need them. Long hours at the laundromat." Emma nodded, fighting back tears she didn't understand. "Thank you," she said softly. Jack shrugged like it was nothing, but the way he looked at her, calm, steady, kind, said everything he didn't. Later that evening, Lily noticed the shoes too. "Those look nice," she said, grinning. "Now you can run faster." Emma laughed, pretending to race her across the room. For a few precious moments, it felt like a home, like she had always belonged there. That night, as she lay awake listening to the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall, she whispered to herself, maybe staying a little longer won't hurt. The days rolled into weeks, and the little house by the field felt less like a stopover and more like a home. The routines became sacred: breakfast with Lily before school, Jack's quiet humming while he fixed something in the shed, and the soft glow of the porch light that always waited for her when she came back from work. But even in that peace, Emma noticed things. Small things. Jack's cough that lingered longer each week. The way he sometimes gripped the edge of the table before sitting down. How he'd smile whenever she asked if he was okay. The kind of smile people wear when they don't want to tell the truth. One evening, after dinner, he went outside to get some air. Emma followed quietly, standing a few steps behind him. He was staring at the horizon, shoulders heavy, the fading sunset painting his face in orange and gold. "You should have told me," she said softly. He turned, caught off guard. "Told you what?" She took a deep breath. "That you're sick." Jack's lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the grass. "I found your prescription bottle," she said, her voice trembling. "You didn't think I'd notice you skipping your medicine?" Jack looked down, exhaling through his nose. "Didn't think it mattered." "It does matter," she said, stepping closer. "You can't just ignore it." He smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. "Emma, I've been ignoring it for a long time. Long before you showed up." She wanted to argue, to yell, to demand why, but something about the way he said it stopped her. He looked out into the distance, his voice low. "Doctors said it's just a matter of time. No treatment that works. I didn't want Lily to grow up surrounded by hospitals. So I brought her here, somewhere quiet. Somewhere she could just be a kid." Emma's throat tightened. "And you planned to do this alone?" Jack met her eyes. "I didn't plan for anyone to show up." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind only the fading glow of twilight. Finally, Emma whispered, "You should have told me sooner." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but you brought light into this house, Emma. And I didn't want that light to turn into pity." She looked away, tears blurring her vision. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Lily's soft breathing from the next room, and Jack's muffled cough from the living room couch. Her heart ached. Not for herself, but for the quiet strength of a man who carried more than his share of pain and still smiled anyway. The next morning, Emma made breakfast early. Pancakes, the way Lily liked them. When Jack walked in, she placed a small folded note on the table beside his mug. "What's this?" he asked. She smiled weakly. "Something I should have said sooner." He unfolded the paper and read the words silently. It wasn't long, just one line. "You don't have to do this alone." For a while he said nothing. Then he reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "But this is my burden to carry." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not anymore." But Jack only smiled, the same quiet, tired smile she'd seen before. "You've already done enough, Emma." Later that day, while she walked Lily to school, Emma noticed the little girl holding a daisy. Small, fragile, bright yellow. "Where'd you get that?" she asked. "Daddy gave it to me," Lily said. "He said flowers don't last forever, but that's what makes them special." Emma didn't say anything. She just nodded, blinking away the sting behind her eyes. That evening, when she came home, the house felt different. Still. Too still. The lamp in the living room was on, casting a faint golden glow. Jack was sitting in his chair, his head tilted slightly, eyes closed, peaceful as if he had simply fallen asleep. The note she'd written was still on the table beside him. Emma stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. The air felt heavy, unmoving. She stepped closer, kneeling beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "Jack?" No answer. Her eyes filled as she reached for his hand, still warm, but unmoving. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of lilies from the garden. Lily's drawing, the one with the 3 stick figures, hung on the wall above him. Emma pressed her forehead against his hand and whispered, "You didn't do it alone, Jack." "Not really." The funeral was small, quiet, just a few neighbors, some townspeople, and Emma holding Lily's hand tightly. Lily didn't fully understand what was happening, but she stood tall, brave, just like her father. When the last words were spoken and the crowd began to leave, Emma lingered. She placed the same daisy Lily had once carried onto the wooden casket. "Rest now," she whispered. "You've earned it." As she turned to leave, the clouds parted slightly, letting sunlight spill across the field. It caught the edges of the gravestone, glowing faintly. Emma looked up, and for a brief, fleeting second, she could almost see him standing there, smiling that same quiet smile. And just like that, he was gone. The days after the funeral passed like a blur. The house was quiet, too quiet. The chair by the window was empty. The jacket still hung on the hook, and the faint smell of coffee lingered like a memory that refused to fade. Emma stayed for Lily. She couldn't bring herself to leave, not yet. Every morning, she'd make breakfast, tie Lily's hair, and walk her to school. Then she'd come back, sit on the porch and watch the horizon. The same one Jack used to stare at in silence. One evening, as she was tidying up, she found an envelope tucked inside one of Jack's old books. Her name was written across it in his handwriting, steady but faint. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a folded letter, written on plain paper, the edges slightly yellowed. "Emma, if you're reading this, it means I've already gone. I don't know how long you stayed, but if you're still here, then I want to thank you for bringing light into this house when it was growing dim. You gave Lily laughter again. You gave me peace. I know you probably think you didn't do much, but you did more than you'll ever realize. You reminded me what kindness looks like. Quiet, patient, real. I'm leaving a small box under the porch. It's not much, but it's what I've managed to save. Use it to take Lily somewhere new, somewhere she can grow, where she won't remember her father's sickness, only his stories. And one last thing, Emma, don't let this house turn into another ghost. Open the windows. Let the air in. Let the laughter stay. You came into our lives by accident. But maybe some accidents are meant to happen. Jack." By the time she finished reading, her hands were shaking, and her cheeks were wet. She folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest, whispering, "You stubborn man." That night, she sat with Lily by the fireplace. "Your dad left us something," she said softly, showing her the small wooden box. Inside were a few bills, a silver watch, and a folded photograph. A picture of Jack, Lily, and Emma taken one morning before breakfast. They hadn't even realized it was taken. Lily had snapped it with Emma's phone while they were laughing. Lily looked at it quietly, her small fingers tracing her father's face. "Are we leaving?" she asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Not forever. Just to start fresh." Lily smiled faintly. "Daddy would like that." The next morning, the two of them stood outside the little house one last time. The sky was clear, the wind calm. Emma locked the door, placed the key under the doormat, and turned around. The field stretched endlessly before them, golden, peaceful, alive. Lily looked up. "Where will we go now?" Emma smiled. "Somewhere new. Somewhere he'd want us to be." They walked down the dirt road together, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of amber and pink. Halfway down the road, Lily stopped and looked back. "Will he know where we're going?" Emma knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "He'll always know. That's what love does. It follows you, even when you can't see it." Lily nodded thoughtfully, then slipped her small hand into Emma's. They kept walking, side by side, into the morning light. Weeks later, they settled in a small coastal town, somewhere quiet but bright, where the air always smelled like salt and new beginnings. Emma found a job at a cafe near the shore. Lily started school and made new friends. Every evening, they'd sit by the beach, watching the sunset fade into the waves. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Emma could almost hear Jack's voice, calm, steady, warm. "You don't have to do this alone." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Months passed. Life moved on gently, naturally. One day, Emma took out Jack's letter again, unfolding it carefully. The words still carried the same weight, the same comfort. At the bottom, she wrote a new line in her own handwriting. "We're doing okay, and we're still letting the laughter stay." She placed the letter in a small glass jar and buried it by the edge of the shore, where the waves could reach it someday. As she stood there, the breeze caught her hair, the sunlight dancing across the water. Lily came running toward her, holding 2 ice creams and laughing breathlessly. Emma smiled, kneeling to hug her. "Hey, slow down." Lily grinned. "You always say that." And in that simple, fleeting moment, with the ocean behind them, the world moving forward, and laughter in the air, Emma realized something. Maybe goodbye isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning of a promise kept. Time has a strange way of healing, not all at once, but in quiet, almost invisible moments. You don't wake up one day and realize you've moved on. You simply notice that the pain doesn't weigh as heavy as before, that the silence feels softer, and that the memories no longer ache. They simply exist. For Emma and Lily, life became a collection of small, beautiful routines. Morning walks to school, notes in lunchboxes, laughter that filled the kitchen again. The little moments Jack once called the good stuff. Sometimes, Emma still caught herself setting 3 plates at the table instead of 2. Old habits die slowly, but instead of sadness, there was a kind of warmth in it. A quiet reminder that love doesn't fade when someone's gone. It just changes form. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma and Lily sat by the shore, watching the waves roll in and out. Lily turned to her and asked, "Mom, do you think Daddy can see us?" Emma smiled softly. "I think he can. But more than that, I think he's here." Lily frowned, puzzled. "Here? Like, watching us?" Emma nodded, looking toward the ocean. "Every time you laugh, every time we share kindness, every time we keep going, that's him. That's how he stays." Lily was quiet for a moment, then leaned her head on Emma's shoulder. "Then we'll keep laughing, so he never goes away." Emma wrapped an arm around her, eyes glistening. "That's exactly the promise we made." As the days turned into years, Emma often thought about the word afterlife. People used to say it's where we go when we die, somewhere far away, unreachable. But she began to see it differently. Maybe the afterlife isn't somewhere beyond the clouds. Maybe it's right here, in the love we leave behind, in the hearts we shape, in the lives we quietly change. Maybe legacy is the afterlife. And in that realization, she found peace. One morning, many years later, Lily, now grown, stood by the same shore, the waves still whispering their eternal rhythm. She placed a single daisy into the water, just like her father once did. As the flower floated away, she smiled, whispering, "Hey, Dad, we're still laughing." The wind picked up gently, carrying her voice into the horizon, blending with the sound of the sea. And for a brief, unexplainable moment, the sunlight shimmered brighter, as if the universe itself smiled back.